אוקיי, תודה לכולם שהצטרפו. סליחה, הייתה לנו בעיה טכנית קלה, המרצה נמצא בהיוסטון בארצות הברית. תודה לכל מי שהצטרף, אני אציג אותו בכמה מילים ואז נתחיל. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very excited to welcome Dr. Tom Arnold to our seminar here in Bar-Ilan University. Dr. Tom Arnold is a graduate of the University of Houston College of Optometry. He is passionate about specialty contact lenses and their ability to help patients struggling with compromised vision related to the cornea. Dr. Arnold is a fellow of the Scleral Lens Education Society and a member of the International Society of Contact Lens Specialists. Along with Dr. Melissa Barnett, he co-chairs the International Congress of Scleral Contacts, the first conference in the world solely dedicated to scleral contact lenses. He has been a contributing editor to Contact Lens Spectrum and Review of Optometric Business. Dr. Arnold is on the advisory board of the GAZ Permeable Lens Institute. An international speaker, Dr. Arnold has presented in many places all over the world. Last September in Jerusalem, I was fortunate to be able to hear him lecture about scleral lenses. Let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Tom Arnold, who woke up so early this morning to enlighten us with his expertise and insights, which will no doubt enrich our seminar. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That's lovely. Let me. I appreciate the invitation. I had a great time in Israel and meeting a lot of old friends and made some new ones. So again, thanks for coming. I think it's time for me to share my screen and let me see. Share the screen. Let's see here.
Dr. Arnold, if you can make me a host, I will really appreciate it so I can help other people to go in.
Oh, okay. Let me see.
You know how?
I do not know how to do that.
So participants, and my name is Oria Eisen.
Okay, let's see here. I'm screen sharing. Participants, yes. Invite. Do I invite you?
No. You are just on the three dots in the corner.
Oh, okay, got it. 3 dots, yes.
So there is something, make a host or something like that.
Pause recording. I don't see that. I'm sorry, not on the 3 dots. Let me look under participants. Here you are. Oh, I see now. Hang on.
Great, thank you.
Make host. Yes.
Thanks.
Now, do I have to change it back?
No.
I don't.
Okay. I think it's okay.
All
Thank you.
All right. Change host. Change host. Okay, you're now the host.
Great.
All right. So let me see. Okay, are we good now?
We are good. Thank you very much.
Okay. Now just tell me how I hide this panel on the side. How do I hide all of you? Because you're on
there is an X on the right side. Upward.
X. I don't see it, but I don't think it matters. Okay, let's get started. So battling astigmatism, right? Seems like a fairly benign comment for people who are optometrists or opticians or ophthalmologists, but I hope to take a deeper dive. And the reason is patients sometimes get very concerned when they hear the word astigmatism, as this little cartoon illustrates. They think it's something really, really bad. Okay. So why are we here? Why did you all take your time out from your schedules today to be here with us? Okay, because I really think that we can always learn something more. We can always take a deeper dive, can't we? Love the quote from the famous physicist Stephen Hawking, that the greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance, it's the illusion of knowledge. And Donald Ezekiel, who many of you may have heard of, really a father of the modern scleral lenses, said there's always something extra that we can do with our patients, always something a little extra. Let me see if I can get rid of this side panel one more time, because it really is kind of in my way. Let's see. Well, not yet. Let's see. Wait a minute. Yeah. Well, we'll just carry on. So astigmatism, we all know the definition. It means without a point. But I think when we encounter astigmatism in our patients, we need to ask a few questions. Where is the astigmatism? Is it corneal? Is it internal, or what we'd call lenticular? Is it a little of both, which is often the case? And then what kind of astigmatism is it? Is it regular? Is it just myopic astigmatism, hyperopic, or mixed astigmatism? And is it irregular or is it asymmetrical? And we're looking at an axial map here, a sagittal map, and we're going to talk a lot more about that. So how do we diagnose it? When Dr. Burkow and I started, we had about all we had was our retinoscope. We looked for scissors reflex or irregular reflex. Maybe we were fortunate enough to have a B&L keratograph, which is what our keratometer, which is what you see here. And we look at the Myers, and we would see if they were regular and uniform or if they were distorted in some way. And of course, again, we know what it is. It's two different points, a without stigma point, and that results in a blur circle, on the retina. Every patient is unique. We encounter them. I love art. I'm a big fan of art. I like Picasso's art, and often amused by his pictures of eyes and faces and how they get distorted. So what would Picasso do? Well, if it's regular astigmatism and it equals the refractive astigmatism, then we might consider a corneal contact lens. On the other hand, if the corneal astigmatism doesn't equal the refractive astigmatism, then there's something internal. And so we need to use something like maybe a soft toric lens. But if the cornea is essentially spherical and you have a refractive component of astigmatism, then you have to look at either the posterior cornea and or the lens. I'm going to try one more time to get rid of this little side panel here. Hey, if you're the host, can you make that side panel go away?
No, it's in your computer. Maybe press again on participants.
I don't know. That's not working. All right. Well, I know this pretty well, so I think I can do without it. So just a simple illustration of things that we encounter every day. Spectacle RX equals the keratometry readings, the curvature of the cornea. And so again, I would urge everybody to think about a rigid lens, because that neutralizes the corneal astigmatism, and then we don't have to worry about alignment and left add, right subtract, etc. Rigid lenses, corneal lenses, give us good vision. They're inexpensive. They last a long time. You just have to overcome maybe some of the patient concerns that they're going to feel it, or adaptation concerns. And of course, you have to consider the environment. I know Israel is a very dry environment, maybe dusty and windy. And so you have those concerns, but at least think about your patient, consider a rigid lens. The other obvious example too is you have significant astigmatism in the prescription, but your cornea is essentially spherical. So in those cases, you do have to use a soft toric lens, something like that. And then you have those cases that just don't make any sense, that you have large degrees of corneal astigmatism, the keratometry readings don't match up with that. We call it crazy town. And so that's an irregular cornea in some manner, and we have to investigate a little further. And I think topographical maps are very, very important. We didn't have them until, probably the mid to late 90s, 1990s, early 2000. And the advantage of topography is that we get to see a larger area of the cornea. And we're pretty much used to using axial maps or maybe a tangential map. And the important point I want to make here is that this describes the power change on corneas, okay? This is not on the axial map on the upper left. That's not like a cone. You can't point at that red dot and say, well, that's a cone. It's not necessarily the steepest part or even the most elevated part. It's the part of the cornea that has the most power change. And that's a very, very important concept. We don't fit axial maps. We don't fit tangential maps. We fit the elevation. So with an elevation map, that describes the true shape of the cornea. And you can see in this slide how those two match up. And the difference, and the interesting thing to note about elevation maps is that the color scheme is reversed. If we look back, if I can go back a minute, the steepest part, the most curved part is red. And the flatter areas, the less curved, are blue and purple. But in an elevation map, it's exactly the opposite. The elevated part, that is the part that's above a best fit sphere, the more elevated part is illustrated in red. Therefore, it's higher, but it's also maybe flatter. And the converse of the steeper areas, the areas with the most curvature are going to be blue. So when we fit any kind of contact lens on the eye, we really have to be aware of the elevation of the cornea. That's really where the lens is going to sit. And then we've probably in the early mid-2000s, then we had tomography. Tomography is a whole different type of measurement of the cornea. It uses a Scheimpflug camera, and therefore it looks at the anterior and posterior surface of the cornea. And this is very, very important, especially in cases of keratoconus or pellucid, where the ectasia or the distortion happens on the posterior surface first of all. And so with Scheimpflug technology, we can look at that posterior surface of the cornea. And it also gives us global pachymetry, so we can see where the thinnest part of the cornea is. What is Scheimpflug? Well, Scheimpflug, we'll talk a little bit about him in a second, but the issue with Scheimpflug technology and the benefit is that when you are taking a picture of a surface that's not flat, that's curving away, then the subject plane, which is going away from you, is not parallel to the lens or the image plane. And so Theodor Scheimpflug was a captain in the Austrian army right before World War I. And his job was to fly around in a plane and photograph the enemy positions. You remember in World War I, there were trenches and fixed lines of battle. So he developed a system where he brought the subject plane into in line with his image plane. And so everything was in a single focus. And that's what Scheimpflug technology is. That's Theodor Scheimpflug. And that's one of his very, very early cameras that he used to do this. One of the features of a pentacam camera, which is a type of Scheimpflug, there's the orb scan, there's the pentacam, and there's a camera called the Galilei. And those are the three main Scheimpflug type tomographers that are available to us. Again, let's talk about elevation. When you have a regular best fit sphere, like in the earlier pictures that we've already looked at, there is one curve that is smooths and takes an average of all the various curves of the cornea. Okay, and that is called the best fit sphere. The problem with that, with an ectatic cornea, is that if you smooth out the highs and the lows of the true corneal shape, you don't get a good illustration of where the ectasia is. So in the Bellin Ambrosio, it's Michael Bellin and Renato Ambrosio came up with this, two ophthalmologists. And what they did was they say, okay, let's exclude the most ectatic part of the cornea. Let's remove the highest, the most ectatic, most irregular part. And let's exclude that and make our best fit sphere with that removed. And when you do that, as you can see in the picture in the lower right, the ectatic area really pops out. And I know it's hard to read, but if you look at the very bottom right of the map here, you'll see a series of 6 little boxes there. And they're all red, which means they're all many standard deviations away from normal. So this is a really good screening device for keratoconus. And this is really, really good for those of you who may be working with surgeons who are doing LASIK or other refractive techniques to really make sure that these are normal corneas that you're dealing with. So as much as we love rigid lenses and scleral lenses, there are soft contact lens options for early ectasia, okay? And the benefit of a custom-made soft contact lens is that there's much wider range of parameters and base curves, powers. You can dial in the prescription to 1 degree of axis, various thicknesses. You put prism in it, all sorts of things. So these are options that are available to us. Here's just one example from one lab. And you can see the wide range of base curves and diameters and powers. And the fact that these lenses are made to order, we get them a lot quicker. If we use the standard lenses from the big companies that we all know, even in their extended range, if you order something, an extended range lens that maybe has over 3 diopters of cylinder, you have to wait for that lens to be manufactured in mass in what we call a run. But in a custom lens, a custom soft lens, it's made just like a rigid lens. They will make the lens to order very, very quickly. This is a nomogram table, again, from just a sample of one of these labs. You look at, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more, you can look on the description there, and you'll notice it says iris diameter, right? Why does it say iris diameter, horizontal visible iris diameter? Because horizontal visible diameter is related to elevation. So the bigger the eye, the bigger the cornea, the more elevated it is. So that's why this map is only for horizontal visible iris diameters in this range, and they would have other maps for other diameters. And so it's an easy map, as you can see. You look at the keratometry reading that you get, the flattest K reading. There are 3 different plastics there. So when you intersect, when you go up vertically, then you'll hit, and it'll give you the base curve and the diameter of the lens. So very interesting, very good. So these really are soft cone lenses. They're thicker, mask, less oxygen, but they're thicker. That's why there's less oxygen. But they're too available in very small limits. Now here's an example of how you could use that. Here's a man that has keratoconus. If you look at the posterior elevation, the posterior cornea on the right, you'll see the elevated ectatic areas. But you'll notice that even though he has 2 diopters of astigmatism, his Kmax is 54. He definitely has keratoconus, but his anterior surface is fairly regular. These are in microns. He only has a few microns. 30 microns is his deepest point there on around the 7 o'clock meridian. It's 30 microns. It's extremely small, and it's only in that one area. So even though this is keratoconus, he doesn't need a rigid lens. He doesn't need a scleral lens. And so one of these cone lenses, they're a little bit thicker, will suit him just fine. And this is, the power of elevation maps. But I do like corneal gas perm lenses. I have friends who, when fitting a person who's had a penetrating keratoplasty, a PKP, they will try a rigid corneal lens first before going to a scleral. And that's out of concern of oxygen to the eye. That's not a big issue with me. I fit many, many sclerals over people with PKs with no problem. But it is something to consider. And so when you have corneal cylinder that's approximately equal to your refractive cylinder, that's when you start thinking about a gas perm lens. They can correct very high degrees of astigmatism. As we said, they're less expensive, they're easier to maintain, they last a long time. When you get more corneal curvature greater than 2.5 diopters, then you are going to be thinking about a bitoric lens. And I love bitoric lenses because we don't have to worry about how they position. They self-position. The acuity is very, very good. The optics are very, very good. So something to keep in mind. And it's just a matter of training the patients and being powerful and being confident in your recommendation. So another little case here that I think was very, very interesting. I had a 15-year-old African-American young guy come to me, and he was referred because the referring doctor thought he had keratoconus. And if you look at his manifest prescription and his acuity, and you look at his amount of astigmatism, you go, well, yeah, he probably does have keratoconus. 15 years old, and that's when we see a lot of changes in early keratoconus. But this is where tomography is really advantageous. If you look at the maps on the right side, his left maps, you'll see that is a completely normal cornea. On the left, the posterior surface, where we know the keratoconus usually starts, is also extremely regular. He has one little point of elevation. If you look at the very lower left picture there, you see a little yellow dot, which means that small area is a little more elevated than the other area. But still, if you look at the little boxes that I pointed out in the earlier slide, you just see that one area flagged as yellow, which just means caution. And so for a 15-year-old with these minor changes, could he have keratoconus? Certainly. He certainly could, but he doesn't have it now. So you don't have to go to any extraordinary lengths to fit this guy. And so we look back at the axial maps, and they are useful. And I don't mean to say that they're not. They give you the idea of where the power change is. And you can see it's our perfect bow tie, our perfect dumbbell, which means all his curvatures on the front surface. And we've already proved that with the tomography. So this is an illustration where, what's Picasso going to do? All right. Well, he's going to fit him with a bitoric lens. And that's exactly what we did. And so if you look at that you have all this toricity on the back surface and front, of course, of the rigid lens, look how it aligns. Look how it aligns almost perfectly with a nice clearance. Now, I will say that the lens on his right lens, which is, of course, on the left side of the picture, I like that lens fit a little better. You can see that you have some iris detail there. You can see a pupil. You can see some iris detail. His left lens is a little steep. We've got a lot of fluid in there, and we don't see the iris. So I may flatten those curves a little bit, but he was comfortable and he adapted well, and he saw very, very well with these lenses. So something to keep in mind. I don't know about how many people in Israel have had the radiokeratotomy. I know that was extremely popular in the United States in the 70s and 80s when I started practicing. And I practiced out of Houston, Texas, which was the fourth largest city in America. And it has a very, very large medical community. And so we had many, many patients who had radiokeratotomy. In fact, in the early days of RK, firefighter unions and police unions and people that were involved in very physical activities, they would get it paid for, because they thought this was an advantage that their firefighters and policemen and so forth, first responders, didn't have to wear glasses and didn't have to wear contacts. They thought this was a great idea. But anybody who's been around this long enough knows that these patients are very unstable, and after a number of years they become very hyperopic and they very irregular stigmatism. So we fit a lot of these, and we fit a lot of them in scleral lenses also. But the point I want to make here is that they can be fit in a rigid lens, and often with better optics. And that's a point. As much as I love scleral lenses, and we're going to talk about scleral lenses here in a minute. As much as I love them, they don't necessarily give you better vision. They give you more stable vision, more comfortable vision, longer wearing time, all that. But you never want to take someone out of a gas perm lens or a hybrid lens that's been on the cornea and say, oh, you're going to see a lot better in the scleral. That's not necessarily true. And so you don't want to set them up for disappointment. But you can certainly fit these with a little effort with a corneal lens. Again, this is another case of irregularity where we used a corneal lens. And what I really like about this particular case is if you look at the axial map in the upper left, you can see the curvature change, all right? You look in the middle map, which describes the actual shape of the cornea, you can see that the blue, of course, is going to be the steeper area, the area below the best fit sphere. And then going across horizontally, this is a with the rule astigmatism, you can see that it's going to be flatter. And if you look at the forcing pattern of the lens that we fit, you can see it almost mimics the elevation. You can see where the areas of fluid accumulation, the the tear layer. You can see where the tear layer is thicker underneath the areas that fall off the curve. And so it really illustrates how elevation maps can tell you what to expect when you look at the lens actually on the eye. So again, we've talked about they definitely have a place in your toolbox. And I said, for patients that go, well, I don't know, that's going to hurt, or how am I going to get used to them? I say prescribe boldly. We talk about the power of the pen. A lot of you don't have pens anymore, but guys like me and Burkow, we're used to writing things out and so forth. Now it's all EMR. But I like Dr. Gary Gerber, who's a consultant here in the United States. He has the 4 R's: the repeat what the patient told you, what their concerns are. You review your findings and say, okay, you told me you can't do this, can't do that, and this is your concern. Well, this is what we found. That's the review. Then you recommend and you say, this is what, based on my experience and your concerns, this is what I think you ought to do. And then, of course, you recall them. All right. So when do we pick a scleral lens? When do we go to scleral lenses? Some early work by Randy Kojima and Pat Caroline looked at corneal elevation and measured the difference in elevation in corneas in the meridian of greatest curvature. And they found that in any given meridian, the meridian of greatest curvature, if there was less than 350 microns of elevation difference, then these patients could tolerate a rigid lens, a corneal lens. They did another study in 2023 and posted that at the Global Lens Symposium in Las Vegas, and they just confirmed their data. Right, Randy Kojima, if you don't know him, he's not an optometrist. He's a contact lens expert, contact lens technician, and he's a very, very knowledgeable person about topography. And so he gives lectures, and there's a series of YouTube lectures where Randy's talking about all the different maps that we get on topography and tomography. It's very, very good. So I would recommend it to you. But anyway, this is what they did. And you can, again, see the difference now between the axial maps and the elevation maps. And you can see that on the axial map, what I've said before, that little red dot, that's not a cone. All right, that's the area of greatest curvature. If you look at the elevation map, you can see where the cornea drops off there, and that's where the cornea has the power change, but the elevation is much deeper there, steeper. And so again, they found the area where there's most change. They drew a chord across it, and they measured the difference in elevation. And that's where these data come from. When the difference in elevation was less than 350 microns, then they found that they could very successfully have an 88% chance of fitting a corneal lens. And this is when 127 eyes. But of course, the converse is true. When they have greater elevation differences, greater than 350, then it's more difficult to fit a corneal lens, and you ought to consider a scleral lens. So very, very good data. And okay, there is a middle ground, as J.R.R. Tolkien had his Middle Earth. Well, there's a middle ground. And that, of course, is the hybrid lenses. Hybrid lenses do have a place. They do have an advantage of when you want a corneal lens, but either the fit is very difficult, or like I said, you're in a dusty environment, a dry environment, then a scleral or a hybrid lens really does have a place. They've gotten so much better. I used all the generations of these hybrid lenses through my career, and they really have gotten a lot better. The two major problems that I found in hybrids was one, that the skirt would tear off. The bonding was not good between the soft portion and the RGP portion. The other part that really, was difficult in some cases was what we call the skirt, the soft part. You only had three choices. It could be flat, standard, or steep. And the problem with that is if it's too flat, you get fluting and it's not aligning. If it's too steep, it's going to suck on. But now they have a new lens called the ID lens. This is Synergize ID, and it is vision. It is driven by HVID. We talked about how HVID is related to elevation. And so on this little chart, if you look at it, the HVID is in the blue bar that's running vertically on the side. And you'll see they have, I don't know, about 10 or 12 different skirt elevations. And so, or what an elevation, degrees, angles. And so the angle is linear because we know from many, many studies now that once you get off the cornea, the sclera is very, very straight. It's very, very tangent. And so these skirts, these soft portions are not a curve. They're straight. And we give them in just 1 degree increments. So I think this is going to be a much better lens and something certainly you should be considering. We always do think about scleral lenses, though. Ken Pullum is in the UK. He's at Moorfields, as well as his own practice. He's been doing this for many, many years. And Ken is a proponent of the very large real scleral lenses, 21, 24 millimeters. I know Ken very well, and we were at a dinner. He has his own little course in the UK every year, and on his card where he selected his meal choices, he couldn't resist drawing some pictures and telling me about some of his latest designs. So Ken's a funny guy. All right, so when do we use scleral lenses? And I love scleral lenses in advanced keratoconus, pellucid, post-penetrating keratoplasty, post-refractive surgery, trauma. There's a whole bunch of reasons why we should be fitting scleral lenses. Okay, they're comfortable, they're stable. Okay, you have to convince people to take them out. A lot of people, they're so comfortable and they like their vision, they want to sleep in them. So you have to get them, take them out. It does neutralize the anterior corneal stigmatism, not posterior. So we can make them with cylinder and put toricity in them. They're great for multifocals. They're really, really great because the challenge in a multifocal is, to center the optics where they need to be or decenter it, from the apex of the lens. And so we can do that because they are very stable. And the landing zone, what I still call the haptic or the landing zone, has to be aligned and can be aligned quite well with the scleral shape. This is a landmark paper from Greg Denier and his team in 2017. And what it did was they measured a number of eyes, I think 140 scleral patients. And they said, well, how irregular is the scleral shape, scleral surface? And I think it's easiest to look at in this form. And I want to define this for you. So less than 6% of the 140 patients were what they call a spherical scleral shape. And the definition of spherical to them in this study was if the elevation difference was less than 300 microns. So this means that almost all of your patients, will have at least 1 to 2 up to 300 microns of elevation difference. Toric regular means they have more than that, but it's in a regular shape, a with the rule, against the rule. It's steeper vertically or flatter horizontally or vice versa. And the amount of that is fairly regular. Asymmetric means that it's still vertically maybe steeper, horizontally steeper, but the difference in elevation in that steep meridian or in the flat meridian is more than 200. Okay, so even if you have a regular toric haptic that you order and you fit it on the steep meridian, flat meridian, you're still going to have a lot of elevation difference in the landing zones. That's what they call asymmetric. And then irregular means they have no pattern at all. You know, the steep sides can be, you know, at 12 and 3, the flat can be 3 and just could be anywhere. So the majority of your patients have a very irregular landing zone, right? This is an example from Greg Denier of an asymmetric meridian, all right, where you can see from the elevation map here. So the red part is the cornea. Then everything outside the red part is the scleral shape. And so blue is steeper, remember, but look, the difference is 200 microns. So your regular toric haptic that you'd get in any given scleral lens is still not going to fit well. So how do you figure all this out? Well, there's several different profilometers out there that are available to you. A lot of them they're keratometers, topographers, as well as topographers of the sclera itself. So you've got 3 different units here, and then you have impression molding. The picture on the right is of my office down in Houston. I retired now, but this is my office that I had for many years, and we had all the different instruments there. And the joke about this is that when people would come to visit, they would go, "Oh, Dr. Arnold, I mean, you have everything. You have all the equipment." And I said, "Yes, I do, but my car is 17 years old, so I cared more for the equipment than I did my automobile." But it was great to have all this at my disposal, so I could really evaluate patients, you know, to the highest order and try to do what was best for them. If you do use these topographers, then I do recommend you have 2 technicians do it, pre-align the patient. 2 out of 3 of these instruments, the ones that we're seeing now, use fluorescein. They're fluorescein based. They're fluorophotometers. So you have to have a dark room. And it does take some skill with these instruments. So I would, you know, get your best technician and train them and have them do it, virtually everybody. And you need 2 of them, one person to manipulate and hold the patient or help the patient, then the other to run the instrument. But they'll save you so much time. And they'll make things so much better for your patients. So this is a technology I believe that's really worth having. Very, very interesting data that we've come to know in the last few years from courtesy of Dottie Fidel and Christine Sent and perhaps some other people. And that is the limbus is not circular. Okay, our corneas are not a circle. They're an ellipse. And where they're an ellipse, where you have a shorter chord, shorter meridian, that is more elevated. Okay, so the shorter chord here, and if you look at the picture on the upper left there, the 11.3, that's the vertical meridian. The horizontal meridian is 12.2. That's a millimeter difference, you know, in that. Not only that, the shorter chord is more elevated. So the shape is, we have these potato chips or potato crisps called Pringles, and you can see they're like a saddle where you have they're elliptical and their elevation difference here. So this is from Christine Sent. These are from impression molds that were made from the eye. The little gray and blue picture is a digital scan of a impression mold. And the illustration with our American football here is that shorter chord is higher up. And so this is one of the reasons that scleral lenses decenter so much, and they tend to decenter inferiorly, temporally and inferiorly, not only because of the insertion of the extraocular muscles and the elevation of where those muscles are, but also because of this limbal shape factor. So you're often tasked with you're overshooting the shorter chord, too much elevation, too much fluorescein, but then you're landing on the longer chord. So this is the importance of knowing scleral shape or limbal shape. A paper by Dottie Fidel from a few years ago illustrated this very, very well. She said, well, you can make the limbal curves oval and then make all your landing curves oval as well, and you end up with an oval contact lens. or you can just make the internal the limbal areas oval, but then to keep a spherical lens on the periphery, then those outer curves are going to be asymmetrical, thinner in one zone and thicker in the other. Doesn't matter. There's some lenses out now that are even newer than my presentation here. Oh, there's a couple, I think, that the toricity starts in the limbus. And so instead of putting all the toricity in the haptic or the landing zone, if you can start the toricity over the limbus, then you align much, much better. And there's several labs that can do that. And I think I have a couple of pictures here near the end. This same group that when the previous study came out in 2019 and said, okay, you know, I don't have a profilometer. You know, I don't have access to that. Well, they found this was a very good study where they took regular eyes and they took ectatic eyes. And the more ectatic the sclera, the more ectatic the cornea, the more ectatic the sclera. And their little pearl, their little point was that if the apex of the cornea was more than 1.25 millimeters away from the corneal center, then that landing zone is going to be more irregular. And you're probably going to need a quadrant-specific lens where you have 4 different landing zones in the haptic. So depending on where that ectasia is relative to the center will help predict the scleral landing zone shape. It's a very, very good paper. So we're going to do toric, yes. Everybody has, you know, up to 300 microns. The larger the lens, the more toric it's going to be, okay? The farther out you go, the more toricity you're going to have. And a lot of fitting sets that we have access to in the United States, and perhaps you do as well, the whole diagnostic set is toric, and that really helps at least you'll know where the flattest area is and the steeper area is by the way the diagnostic lens aligns. So, you know, there's very few times I ever do a spherical haptic anymore, only in a very small lens. So this is one lab this is their doctor page where you can go in and use their tools, their calculator. So we were talking a minute ago just about limbal elevation, right? And so in this particular lens, this is a Blanchard 1-fit lens, or now in the United States, it's distributed by Cooper Vision, but it's called the 1-fit med. And with the 1-fit med, obviously you control the sagittal depth, okay? You know, how much clearance do you want on this cornea? But you can also control the mid-peripheral depth. And that's what the middle part of this little illustration is, where it says M. That stands for mid-periphery. And you can lower these curves or raise these curves 300 microns each way in 50 micron steps, or I think 25 micron steps. So you can adjust the landing. And so where it's red, where these boxes are red, that's below a best fit sphere. That's more towards the cornea. And the 2 little boxes on the lower right, which are green, would be above. So what you're telling the lab in designing this lens is, you already told them what the sagittal clearance should be, but what is it in the mid-periphery? Okay, that's the M. Then you have the limbal area, and you can see 4 boxes labeled L. So that's where you align over a higher or lower part of the limbal curves. And then you have the E in this illustration means the edge or the haptic, the landing zone. So you can sit there and manipulate this, look at the curvature, and then if that's appropriate, you order the lens. So just an example of how you have control over these areas. This is another brand from another lab here in the United States. And this is a standard toric freeform lens, right? Freeform means that the haptic can be different elevations as we go around. They're not fixed. They will follow the contours of the sclera, and you know that from your profilometry. And so they have this illustrated the limbal zone, the ECC is eccentricity, landing zone eccentricity. So by varying the eccentricity, that's how they align up. Then you have the very edge. So just a different illustration of how the lenses are designed. So, this means that almost the majority of all your lenses are going to be toric. If they're really, really crazy, if they're very, very ectatic, I would consider getting, an eye-print lens. We call eye-print, where you make a mold. And I think Abigail Chacon is doing that now there in Israel. So that will be a great resource for all of you to have. And what that means is there's some eyes that are so ectatic, they're so irregular that you're just not going to fit them in a diagnostic lens. You need to make a mold and then make the lens from that mold. A little tip that I learned years ago from one of our colleagues from Venezuela is that to use lissamine green to determine the alignment of the haptic. Lissamine green is a very light molecule, not very viscous at all. And so what you do is to look at the alignment of your landing zone or haptic, dab a little lissamine green onto the bulbar conjunctiva, on the bulbar conjunctiva. And then in zones that are more elevated, that lissamine green will go right under. And you see it. You do this in white light. It's quick. It's easy. You really kind of see how the haptic aligns. So it's a great tool. I use this a lot. What if you have a prescription that calls for a cylinder in the prescription? I think it's very important to stabilize the lens first. As we said, that in many cases, lenses are going to decenter, and you're going to have to work on the lens design, the fit, to get it to center right. When it decenters, as you can see in the illustration in the middle there, you're going to induce cylinder. So you don't want to order, a cylinder in the prescription with a decentered lens. You want to center the lens first. And my rule of thumb is that I almost never order cylinder in my first scleral lens. And the reason is you don't know how that lens is going to fit. You don't know how it's going to twist and turn, how it's going to decenter. All those things will affect it. So I'd much rather have a spherical equivalent power that's wearable to a patient with keratoconus or pellucid or post-PK or post-RK, something that's functional, as opposed to you determine, well, they need 2 diopters of cylinder, at 45 or something. Well, if that lens, if it decenters and it changes, your 2 diopters of cylinder 10 degrees off is going to be unwearable. So I'd much rather have a 20, what we call a 20-20 good, 20 good, or 20-30 or 20 that's wearable. So I would encourage you to get all the fit issues out of the way first, and then once you get the lens stabilized, then put the cylinder in it if you need to. Same with multifocals. Yeah. So you gotta have it centered. This is what you want. You want a nice wide eye that's well centered. This is a case where he did use cylinder. This was one of my very early cases. This patient was a patient of mine for many years. I fit him in all sorts of different lenses as the understanding evolved. But he was an active guy. He liked to be outdoors and very, very active. His daughter had keratoconus as well. So I did fit him in a Scleral lens. This is before any profilometry. But again, my topographers did have elevation maps. So I hope by now you've heard the lecture that the axial map is not equal to the elevation map, as you can see here. So I was fitting very small lenses at this time. This is actually a 14-9. I did put cylinder in it. I did some extra design to this limbal zone. XCL means extra limbal clearance, and it is toric. And it happened to be a spherical haptic because it's only a 14-9. So it's a very, very small lens. But he did quite well and so forth. Another couple things you can do to stabilize the lens is if you have elevations, if you have pinguecula, we had a lot of those in Texas. because it's, dry and windy and very hot. And so perhaps you have a lot of those in Israel as well. You can use notches or peripheral recesses or microvaults to go around your pinguiculus, and that'll help stabilize the lens. So, don't forget you can use those tools as well. Anyway, that's it for me. Thank you very much for watching. I apologize for a bit of our delay. This is my number here. This is my mobile here in America and my email. So you're welcome to contact me. I'm pretty much retired, so I may be out skiing or traveling or playing golf. I play golf very badly, so that may take a long time. But anyway, happy, and I hope to return to Israel someday. I think of you all. I pray for you all, and really hope the best for your country and everybody in it. And I hope to come back again. There's a lot to see in Israel.
Thank you so much, Dr. Arnold. It was fascinating, and thanks. And you can go back to sleep now.
Coffee time. Were there any questions? Did anybody have any questions or concerns? Nope, nothing. Thank you, chat. Well, you're most welcome. So thank you all for having me. Hope to come back sometime. Keep in touch.
Thank you very much.
All right. Bye-bye. Everybody stay well. Cheers.
Bye.